Meme culture surrounding Half-Life 3 has been around since I started using the internet. And to be honest, I never really got it. Tons of games have ended on cliffhangers that never got resolved. What makes Half-Life so special? Why is it funny that Valve can't count to 3? It always felt like Half-Life 3 actually being confirmed would break the internet, but I personally couldn't have cared less. I never actively avoided the series, but for some reason or another, I never made it a priority to play. I had access to a PC growing up. I liked first-person shooters, but I never felt inclined. As time went on, the thought of going back to a game made in the 90s seemed off-putting. Surely something from that long ago couldn't hold up, right? But curiosity has gotten the best of me. With modern games continuously sucking the love and art out of the industry in place of the endless chase for games as a service money printers, I finally took the time to play the entire Half-Life franchise. I quickly learned that despite everyone begging for Half-Life 3, there are way more than only 2 games. No nostalgia, no preconceived hype, just raw first impressions and a journey through one of gaming's most iconic franchises. Let's see what all the fuss is about, and whether it lives up to the legend. 1998's Half-Life has such a uniquely slow intro that you don't tend to see these days. You're just good old physicist, Gordon Freeman, commuting to work on a seemingly normal day. Except your normal commute includes a trolley ride through a massive underground facility called Black Mesa. It's a full 5 minutes on the Underground Railroad before security greets you at your stop, and another 10 minutes or so before you get your hazard suit on, make your way down to the test area, and then your entire world turns upside down. You just teleported to another dimension, back to the test facility, and reappear to find a ton of carnage. And it was at this point I was like, what the shit is going on? The intro took quite a while to get going, and it did a good job of setting up the scale of the operation. This place is massive, with tons of employees and high-level security with different levels of clearance. It seems like there's some important secrets being hidden, and whatever we've been working on has clearly gone very, very wrong. But I'm intrigued to learn about what I just witnessed, so I guess the intro did its job. We have dead scientists everywhere and are tasked with getting to the surface so we can get help to everyone stuck underground. A simple end goal, but a long journey with twists and turns along the way. What sticks out to me the most is the interactivity within the world. A door may be locked behind a retinal scanner, and you'll need to grab a scientist to open the door for you. A door may be locked, but you can break the glass with the tire iron and crouch through the gap you just created. There's always a path forward, but it's rarely obvious. This creates a sort of puzzle aspect to the game that makes Half-Life interesting and is simultaneously the biggest source of frustration. I can't tell you the amount of times I felt stuck, walked around in circles for a few minutes, only to look up a guide and had a "that's where you needed to go" type of reaction. Sometimes I was on the right path, but just wasn't quite doing it right. Other times I just missed a hole in a dark corner. And other times I was endlessly killing spawning enemies just to figure out I was supposed to keep moving forward through a little hole in the wall. You're always on the lookout for little switches or buttons on the wall to unlock doors or cut off power to help you progress to the next area. While nowadays this doesn't seem like a significant feat, I imagine this was groundbreaking gameplay back in 1998. The whole puzzle aspect of Half-Life is far from my strong suit, but I can still appreciate how far ahead it was for its time. If I had to point out one issue with the original Half-Life, it would have to be how immediately you changed direction mid-air. This made the platforming aspect incredibly frustrating. The amount of times I missed a platform because I was jumping across and tried to stop my momentum and ended up completely missing my landing is incalculable. I imagine the platforming would be easier with a controller where you can move the stick without being at 100% movement speed, but on a keyboard where you're either going full speed or not moving at all, I really struggled. I just feel like with platforming being such an integral part of this game, the movement needed to be more intuitive. But that's my take, could just be a skill issue. As far as the story goes, Half-Life is equally straightforward and abstract. Everything is learned via dialogue spoken to you throughout the game, as well as the environment around you. There are no cutscenes, and I respect the show don't tell aspect. On the surface, you're Dr. Gordon Freeman, a physicist working on some secret research at the underground facility in Black Mesa. Something goes incredibly wrong, and some sort of alien race is teleporting in and killing all the scientists. Your goal is to escape to the surface and call for help, but along the way you run into Black Ops that are deployed to terminate any survivors, presumably to eliminate anyone or anything with evidence of what had been going on here. But the goal of the invading aliens isn't really explained. You just know that they're trying to kill you, so you kill them first. And who in the world is this guy? Why does he carry a briefcase around? He seems to be the enemy with knowledge of what's going on, but doesn't necessarily stop you from succeeding. Is this all just a game? Eventually, you're teleported to Zen to kill some sort of abomination and destroy the portal they're using to send the aliens. And on the way out, you're greeted by the G-Man. He takes your weapons and gives you the option to work for him. If you say no, he sends you to your death. So it seems the canon answer is to accept, in which case you seemingly live, but the game also just ends. What does working for the G-Man entail? It never gets explained. In the end, we solved the issue of the aliens portaling into our world, so in a sense our goal was accomplished. But what comes next for Gordon? While the answer to that will be found in Half-Life 2, we have quite a few games to work through before we get there. While Valve was busy working on a sequel, they contracted Gearbox Software to make 2 expansions. Half-Life Opposing Force, the first expansion, was released exactly 1 year after the base game and adds a new perspective to the events of the original. You play as Corporal Adrian Shepard, a US Marine sent into Black Mesa on an undisclosed mission before being shot out of the sky and waking up in an infirmary. From here, you're more or less just trying to survive long enough to make it to the extraction point and live to fight another day. You battle through Black Mesa, taking out the alien species, run into the Black Ops who were sent to eliminate the Marines and cover up the incident, and even end up in Zen a couple times on this journey. We deactivate the nuke that the Black Ops set up, but later see the G-Man reactivate it. And we end with a massive battle against the Gene Worm. Killing him unleashes a huge portal and sucks Shepard in. This somehow teleports us into a helicopter with the G-Man, where we are detained as a way to tie up loose ends. As far as I know, this is the last we hear about Corporal Shepard. So I'm not gonna say he's dead, but rest in peace, bro. Opposing Force was good for world building. You get to see some events from the base game from a different perspective, like Gordon Freeman being captured by Black Ops, as well as him teleporting to Zen. It's nice to be reminded that as the protagonist, you aren't the only one in a precarious situation. But other than that, the first expansion didn't really do much for me. It was mostly just more Half-Life, with the gameplay not differing much from the base game. Instead of the HEV suit, you just have military armor, but it more or less functions the same. There are some additional weapons as well, but nothing in this 4 to 5 hour package really stuck out to me. It felt like an expansion that could be fully skipped if you, for example, weren't planning on making a YouTube video about your first experience playing through all the Half-Life games. And unfortunately, that sentiment will continue. Half-Life Blue Shift was the second standalone expansion released in 2001 and is a third perspective of the events that happened at Black Mesa. Here you play as a Black Mesa security guard, Barney Calhoun. Barney was having a normal day of work before the Black Mesa incident turned everything on its head. From here, our protagonist is again mostly just trying to survive and escape. He learns that Dr. Rosenberg plans to get himself and his friends out of there via teleportation, and so we rescue Rosenberg from detainment, chaperone him to the teleportation lab, and help him when issues arise. Issues like being sent to Zen to calibrate equipment that will help us get out of Black Mesa, finding a fresh battery cell to power the teleporter, and being sent into harmonic reflux when we finally try making our escape. Thankfully, we eventually stabilize and hitch a ride with Dr. Rosenberg. This was a really short 2 to 3 hour experience that didn't really grab my attention. It was very similar to the base game again, which is cool if you love the original Half-Life. but I was really getting tired of the original formula at this point. During my first playthrough of Half-Life, I was feeling a little frustrated by the gameplay loop, but was still able to see why people could have loved this franchise so much, especially all the way back in the late 90s. But now that I'm on the third iteration of what is essentially the same game, I was really getting tired of it. It was just more of the same, and in my opinion, neither of these two standalone expansions really needed to exist. I was really dragging my feet through the series at this point. It was cool seeing the same events from different perspectives, but I already survived and escaped Black Mesa. It didn't excite me to do it 2 more times. I was really looking forward to Half-Life 2 and seeing what changes the official sequel made to improve on the original formula. But unfortunately, there's still one more standalone expansion to get through. Half-Life Decay was advertised as a multiplayer-only expansion for Half-Life. It was released as part of the PlayStation 2 version of Half-Life in 2001, and therefore is only available on the PS2. What's different about Decay is that it was designed for co-op. I've seen videos of people playing by themselves, switching characters to progress through each level, but I tagged in my brother to help me conquer this new challenge. Unfortunately, he's as bad as I am at figuring out the puzzles, so we still resorted to using guides periodically when we felt lost. Half-Life Decay is the 3rd time we get to play through the events at Black Mesa from an alternate perspective. Here, we play as Colette Green and Gina Cross, 2 doctors who work alongside Dr. Freeman, analyzing materials and specimens retrieved from Zen. Once the Black Mesa incident commences, we escort Dr. Rosenberg to the surface to send a distress signal to the military, and then we work on sealing the dimensional tear to stop the invasion, all ending with a tough boss battle as we try defending the displacement beacon. We're sent into teleportation hell before finally ending up back at the lab with Dr. Keller. I know I've been breezing through these standalone expansions, but I don't feel like there's much to say about them. They all seem like they were afterthoughts tacked on for easy sales as people waited for a proper sequel. I found it hard to connect to any of the characters other than Gordon Freeman. I did appreciate that Decay was meant as a co-op game, and I feel like it could have been something I grew up loving to co-op with my brother if I had played it at the time. But Decay is just another expansion that I felt like I needed to get through so that I could play Half-Life 2. I feel like the original Half-Life formula is too dated to appreciate in today's gaming landscape, and it really made it hard to enjoy these 3 additional experiences after having finished Half-Life. I'm sure when they came out, people were glad to have more of the original experience packaged in something new, but the more I had to play, the less I enjoyed it. But we did it. We've now gotten through all of the first generation of Half-Life games, and it's finally time to continue the story. Half-Life 2 was released on November 16, 2004 to critical acclaim, winning 39 Game of the Year awards, and is considered in many circles as one of the best games ever made. It took the first game and improved in every aspect. The newly upgraded Source engine touted new lighting and graphics that resulted in a game that still visually holds up today. They still stuck to the FPS gameplay with a mix of puzzles, but I found myself getting by the puzzles on my own a lot more. I was no longer missing something simple and getting frustrated enough that I needed to look up a guide. Sure, there were still puzzles I got stuck on, but it was much less frequent than the original. Maybe some hardcore players see this as puzzles being simplified for normies, but I greatly welcome the change. Half-Life 2 also added vehicles and physics-based gameplay with the introduction of the gravity gun, which is used in many instances to solve puzzles and continue progression. In Half-Life 2, we are finally back in control of Gordon Freeman, and it's time to deal with the repercussions of the alien invasion. After the events of Black Mesa, Earth was invaded by an alien empire known as the Combine. We are woken up by the G-Man as he tells us that our time has come again, and we begin our adventure on a train to City 17. We aren't given much context as to what's going on, but it's pretty obvious that City 17 is some sort of police state run by the Combine. Luckily, we have some old friends working for us on the inside, as Barney Calhoun saves us from boarding the Express to Nova Prospect, and tells us to find a way to Dr. Kleiner's lab. Unfortunately, on the way, we're captured and beaten. But luckily, Alyx Vance comes to our rescue and leads us to Dr. Kleiner's lab where we get our HEV suit. Dr. Kleiner tries teleporting us to the main resistance base, but we end up in multiple places, including the office of the Combine's Earth Ruler, Dr. Wallace Breen, which alerts him of our presence. How the hell does he know who I am? From here, we're forced to make the arduous journey to the resistance base on foot, fighting the Combine, solving puzzles, and taking a few joy rides on an airboat. We run into multiple friendly hideouts along the way, meet some friendly Vortigaunts, and eventually make it to the hideout at Black Mesa East. Here we run into Eli Vance, meet Dr. Judith Mossman, and get our hands on the gravity gun. We even get to play fetch with Alyx's dog. It's all fun and games until the Combine attack. They capture both Eli and Judith, but we manage to fight our way out and escape. But now we need to find a way to the Combine prison of Nova Prospect to save Eli and Judith. We walk to a resistance outpost where they gladly provide us with a dune buggy to drive across Highway 17. We have a few pit stops along the way to help the resistance fight off invading Combine gunships and take out the endlessly annoying antlions. But eventually we arrive at Nova Prospect. We break into the prison, find Alyx, and out Judas for being a Combine spy the entire time. It's clear that she genuinely cares about Eli Vance, even though she's actively working against him. And when we get to confront her, she teleports herself and Eli to the Citadel, leaving us to fend for ourselves. After defending against oncoming waves of Combine soldiers, we teleport back to Dr. Kleiner's lab. Somehow, a week of time passed during our teleportation. I guess they sent us via snail mail. But now it's time to fight our way into the Citadel. After a long and grueling road to the Citadel with hundreds of dead bodies left behind, we actually jump into a transport pod and ride it straight up to Dr. Breen's office. Alyx Hawk Tua's right in Dr. Breen's face, and after Breen reveals his intention to use Eli, Alyx, and Gordon as leverage in negotiations with the Combine, Judith turns on him and sets us all free. I thought Dr. Breen was a representative of the Combine, so I don't really get why he needs leverage for negotiation. But I'm glad he double-crossed Judith. From here, all that's left is to destroy the Citadel's reactor with the gravity gun to stop Dr. Breen's escape. As the reactor explodes, the G-Man freezes time and the game ends. The story wasn't the easiest to follow. I had to check in on the wiki to really get a full grasp of what was going on. But Half-Life is a series known for its show don't tell approach to storytelling. With the story being delivered solely through gameplay, there isn't much room for expedition dumps. I feel like it did its job. It expanded on the first game and kept me interested in the world. But I still feel like I finished the game with a ton of questions. Mostly still wondering who this mysterious G-Man is. But overall, the game ended with a literal bang and had me really anticipating what comes next. Overall, I really felt that Half-Life 2 was better than the original in every single way. The upgraded graphics held up much better than its predecessor. The updated physics made the platforming much more tolerable. Or maybe that was just because there was a lot less platforming. And the way the game went about the puzzles was much more appealing to my smooth brain. This game was the turning point where I felt like I was actually excited to continue through the series, as opposed to feeling like I needed to power through it like with Blue Shift, Opposing Force, and Decay. I was finally seeing what all the hype was for, and why people have been clamoring for Half-Life 3 for almost 20 years now. And I would see firsthand why it's so tragic that we never actually got it. Half-Life Lost Coast was a singular cut level from Half-Life 2 that was released standalone for free in October 2005. I wasn't sure if I should cover it in this video, but I thought the developer commentary was a really cool addition to this level. There are about 15 different segments of developer commentary, each speaking about what they're seeing, what's happening in this section, why the team chose to design the level a certain way, and so on. They talk about the HDR and visual fidelity that the devs wanted to get just right in this level, and was an interesting behind-the-scenes look on the development of this level and Half-Life as a whole. Here are some of my favorite parts.
The process of building characters in Half-Life 2 taught us many things. By the end, we believed we'd figured out a more effective process for designing and constructing characters. This fisherman is the first character we built using that process. Design-wise, the fisherman was focused on showcasing HDR and the way light falls on human skin. The highlights on his forehead and nose are good examples of specularity on human skin. You can see how the wrinkles on his cheeks and around his eyes are an example of how we can use normal maps to add depth. Production-wise, the fisherman was built using a similar process to the rocks you saw on the beach. We model the 3D character at a very high detail, then extract much of the physical information and store it in the textures.
The courtyard in front of you is a space we call an arena. Arenas are built to hold the player for a period of time and usually contain combat or some other challenge. They often have multiple entry points for enemies, along with a gate of some kind to prevent the player moving on until the challenge has been completed. In this case, the arena is free of enemies until the player solves a puzzle and triggers an alarm. This is a method that allows the player to explore the arena and get a sense of its space before being forced to fight in it. It adds a sense of uneasiness to the player who's expecting to be attacked now that they've reached the goal set for them at the start of the map. The break in the action here is also a crucial part of the level's pacing. It allows the player to recover and explore the world a little after being attacked on the way up the cliffside.
Half-Life 2 Episode 1 was the first standalone expansion for Half-Life 2, releasing on June 1st, 2006. After the long 6-year development cycle for Half-Life 2, Valve switched to an episodic approach to hopefully get games out more frequently. And it would have worked if they didn't abruptly stop after Episode 2. As far as gameplay goes, I found it to be very similar to Half-Life 2. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Half-Life 2 had me interested in where the story was going, and I really enjoyed the combat. If people like it, just give them more. The only real difference is that you spend more or less the entire game with Alyx as a companion. I didn't notice it much, but reading up about Episode 1, I learned how many resources went into the AI for Alyx. Valve didn't want her to be repeating the same dialogue over and over and wanted her to complement the player instead of being dead weight you have to carry around. They actually designed her in a way where the player can conserve ammo by using the flashlight to spot enemies and have Alyx take them out. I wish I knew this ahead of time so I wouldn't have constantly been searching for ammo. While nothing stuck out to me about Alyx's AI that made me feel like it was exceptional, I didn't notice any negatives either, which is pretty great for a game from 2006. When it comes to the story, it picks up exactly where Half-Life 2 ended. As the reactor explodes and time freezes, a bunch of Vortigaunts save Alyx and then seemingly stop the G-Man from taking you. The G-Man doesn't seem too happy.
We'll see about that.
As we wake up with Dog digging us up out of the fallen rubble. We jump on a call with Eli Vance and Dr. Kleiner, and they let us know the Citadel core is gonna collapse. We need to escape the city, but there isn't enough time. The only chance is for us to make it to the core and stabilize it. Dog yeets us into the Citadel, and we're on our way. We fight our way through, solving puzzles along the way, and stabilize the core. But we learn that the Combine are trying to send a transmission back to their homeworld and are willing to sacrifice the Citadel to do it. We steal a copy of the transmission and find a video log from Judith stating she found the location of some sort of secret project before the Combine crashed the party. Our next goal is to escape with the transmission so Eli can decrypt it. We jump on a train to get out of the Citadel, but just as things are going to plan, the train derails. I guess we'll just walk. We trek through the underground, taking out antlions, and even have a little spooky segment waiting for an elevator in a parking garage. Eventually we survive and finally make it to the surface where we're being pursued by the Combine. After fighting them off, we end up at a train station where we meet back up with Barney. Glad to see you're still alive after all this time, bud. We clear a path to the train yard and are tasked with escorting waves of refugees to the train. We're forced to be the distraction as Barney makes his escape, and I struggle for longer than I'd like to admit trying to take out this gargantua. I just kept running out of rockets, and the other weapons aren't made to take out these beasts. I kept failing until I found a hidden stash and blew that spider sky high, clearing the path for us to jump on the train and get the hell out of there. As we add distance between us and the Citadel, the reactor detonates and the screen turns black. If I had one complaint about episode 1, it's the length. It only took about 3 hours to beat, which is one setback with the episodic model. Taking a step back, it doesn't feel like much happened. In its simplest terms, we wake up in a pile of rubble, stabilize the core to avoid being atomized, and escape City 17. We have a copy of the transmission that the Combine were desperate to get back to their homeworld, so that's something, but we don't know what it's about just yet. We also know that there's some sort of secret facility that Judith alluded to, but these are both clearly breadcrumbs that are supposed to be built upon in the next episode. While I enjoyed getting to experience more of the gameplay, I was a little disappointed. I guess I was just coming off the high of experiencing the huge leap from Half-Life to Half-Life 2, and didn't feel anything close to that with this first episodic entry. But even with the little story progression we got, I'm still feeling invested in the story and excited to see where we go from here. Half-Life 2 Episode 2 was released on October 10th, 2007 and continues the story of Gordon Freeman and Alyx Vance. The episodic style of release accomplished its goal in getting the next Half-Life entry out in 1.5 years instead of 6 years that it took for Half-Life 2. But the downside of episodes is that not much innovation is happening. The gameplay loop is fun and more of something great isn't anything to complain about, but the gameplay is just more of the same. Valve did try to increase the use of vehicles in episode 2, and you traverse some really cool environments here. But overall, it's hard to differentiate between the three products. Episode 1 and 2 feel more like Half-Life 2 DLC than their own game. Again, not a bad thing, but the jump from Half-Life to Half-Life 2 was astronomical, and that set my expectations high for the games that followed Half-Life 2. Episode 2 picks up right where we left off. The train we used to escape the Citadel was derailed in the explosion, so we climb out of the rubble, run into Alyx, and continue on our journey to get back to Eli. Better hurry, something big is brewing. We check in with Daddy, and he tells us the Combine are trying to open another portal. Apparently the transmission we stole is the contact code that can be used to close the portal. No wonder they won't leave us alone. Well, there was no change to the mission, still trying to reach Eli. Unfortunately, we run into a pretty quick roadblock when Alyx is badly hurt by the new Hunter enemy type, and almost eaten by an antlion before a Vortigaunt comes to the rescue. So now we're on a side quest to save Alyx. We follow the Vortigaunt into the underground mine, defend Alyx's limp body from waves of antlions, and take part in a cult-like ritual. Just kidding, they're just trying to save Alyx. But in order to do that, they need me to grab larvae extract from the antlion colony, defended by this monstrosity. We're able to dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge our way around the queen to grab the larvae extract and return to the top of the mine to save Alyx. During the ensuing Vortigaunt ritual, the G-Man interrupts to make sure we know he rescued Alyx from Black Mesa despite others objecting, and that he's gonna seek repayment. He also whispers into the ear of an unconscious Alyx, instructing her to tell Eli, prepare for unforeseen consequences. Wow, that was epic foreshadowing. I'm totally gonna find out who the G-Man is and what's going on, right? Right? Now that Alyx is awake, we continue our quest to meet Eli at White Forest. Our journey is full of enormous bugs, tons of puzzles, and a joyride in one badass buggy. Yeehaw! We have a few pit stops along the way where we get some revenge on the hunters, almost get our brains eaten by whatever the fuck this thing is, and trade our killing expertise for mechanical prowess. We run into a familiar face as we're getting close, and finally arrive at White Forest Base. We deliver the data packet to Dr. Kleiner and are sent to investigate yet another false alarm. Except this time, it's not a false alarm. We have to defend the base from the Combine invasion by taking out everyone that gets in and then closing the silo that they were entering through. Then we can finally reconvene with Eli and Dr. Kleiner as they're watching the video log from Judith. After Judith is interrupted by the attacking Combine, the log cuts to the Borealis, a ship that was lost until this transmission gave us the location. Dr. Kleiner wants us to use it against the Combine, and Eli wants to destroy it. Either way, they agree that Alyx and Gordon will go to the Borealis after Judith. I can't wait for that! Alyx then subconsciously delivers the G-Man's message for Eli, and after shooing Alyx away, Eli reveals the last time he heard that phrase was before the Black Mesa incident. The G-Man actually provided the test sample that caused the meltdown, and Eli says he has a lot more to tell us after the portal is shut down. We're given an experimental weapon called the Magnuson that we can use to take down Striders, and then we're sent out to defend against the Combine's pending attack. For this final section, we need to take out the Striders before they get to the base. But they're heavily defended by hunters that will shoot down the Magnuson as we try sticking it to the Striders. There's a lot going on here, and I found myself struggling heavily to take out the Striders successfully without dying to the hunters. After a few failed efforts, we finally take out the last of the aliens and regroup in the base for the rocket launch to shut down the portal. They let us push the big red button, and before the big kaboom, Eli reminds us that we need to destroy the Borealis. The rocket hits and closes the portal, trapping all remaining Combine forces on Earth. We say our goodbyes to Eli and prepare to jump on a chopper to the Borealis, but two of these things show up and stick their long wormy tongue through Eli's brain. The other one goes for Alyx, but thankfully, Dog shows up to save the day. Eli is dead, and the screen cuts to black with Alyx crying, "Dad, don't leave me." Oh my god! What an insane ending and crazy cliffhanger. Where in the world's Valve gonna go from here? Well, we may never know. Half-Life 2 Episode 3 was announced for Christmas 2007, a short 2 months after the release of Episode 2. But unfortunately, it was cancelled due to Valve abandoning the episodic plan. This points to the story concluding in a third installment of the series, Half-Life 3. But 17 years later, and we're still waiting. I finally get it now, guys. All the times I've seen Half-Life 3 confirmed on forums, Twitch chats, YouTube comments, I've seen it everywhere, and I never really got it. Other than knowing that there's only 2 Half-Life games. Well, there's a lot more than 2, but you get my point. I get it now. How in good conscience can Gabe Newell sleep at night knowing what he did to us? I'm actually baffled how they could end Episode 2 like this and just never release a sequel. The Half-Life series would sit dormant for years after this unfathomable cliffhanger, until Half-Life saw the light of day again, in the most unexpected way imaginable. On March 23, 2020, right as the world was about to go to shit, Valve decided to give us a new entry in the franchise, but with a twist. This new story was exclusive to VR, and that game was Half-Life Alyx. Instead of continuing the story, it was set 5 years before the events of Half-Life 2. Here, we play as Alyx and work with our father as part of the Resistance to fight the Combine. This was actually my first experience with the franchise and is probably why I was a little harsh on any of the games prior to Half-Life 2. The gameplay here is very similar to Half-Life 2, Episode 1, and Episode 2, which might have set my expectations too high for when I went back in time to play the first generation of games. Not only did Half-Life Alyx build off of the incredible foundation of Half-Life 2, it single-handedly raised the bar when it comes to the VR experience. Valve creatively solved the issue of poor tracking in VR headsets by implementing the gravity gloves, allowing you to pull objects up to your hands off the ground instead of needing to bend over to pick them up, which tends to cause your hands to fly away when playing in VR. There's something special about being inside the 3D world that you can't get by looking at a screen, and I've never felt so immersed fighting the Combine. Most VR titles are almost just demos showing off the tech, and for a long time it seemed like the coolest part of VR gaming was showing your friends. But Valve proved that if you actually invest the time and money to create a VR game worthy of being called a AAA product, you can truly make something special. Half-Life Alyx is by far the best VR game I've ever played, and it's not even close. But I guess that's the privilege of being a privately owned company that doesn't answer to investors. You can spend $40 million to develop a one-off VR experience. I wish more dev studios would. As far as the story goes, it makes a lot more sense now that I've played all the other games. Earth is currently living under a police state rulership courtesy of the Combine. Alyx and Eli are arrested and taken under custody. Fortunately, we're saved by the Resistance. Unfortunately, Russell wasn't able to save Eli, and we're informed that he's being transported to Nova Prospect. From here, we venture into the quarantine zone full of Zen creatures as we try to save our dad. We derail the train he's on and watch him fall to his death before being saved by the friendly Vortigaunt, Gary. Eli warns us of a super weapon that the Combine are hiding in a vault within the quarantine zone, and it's our job to find it. We fight past more Combine, shut down a power station holding the vault up, and free the Vortigaunt, who are so thankful they vow to help us take down the remaining power stations. We learn that the vault isn't actually a super weapon, but rather a prison built to contain something the Combine found. Russell assumes this is Gordon Freeman, and so Alyx goes to save him. She tries bringing down the vault, but instead causes it to crash and burn. R.I.P. Gordon. We fight through the rubble and make it to the vault, but we don't find Gordon Freeman. When accessing the vault, we actually free the G-Man from captivity by the Combine. The G-Man rewards us by reversing the death of Eli in episode 2 and states we've proven ourselves worthy of replacing Gordon Freeman. We've been hired and are left in stasis by the G-Man as we watch him leave. We then cut to Eli regaining consciousness since he was no longer killed at the end of episode 2 and notices Alyx is gone. Eli hands us a crowbar and vows to kill the G-Man. Wow, I remember seeing this ending for the first time and having literally no idea what was going on. I mean, I still don't know what's going on. Who's the G-Man? I always assumed he worked for the Combine. But if that were the case, they wouldn't need to capture him in a vault. It's nice that we saved Eli from dying, but at the cost of Alyx being captured. Will we ever get an answer, or is this the last Half-Life game Valve ever releases? It's promising to see that this game set in the past actually does advance the story of episode 2 with Eli being saved and Alyx now being captive. I can't imagine they would have added that bit at the end if they didn't intend to finish the story eventually. And at the time of writing, rumors have recently started swirling up about Valve working on Half-Life 3. So fingers crossed we finally get a resolution. And it seems like I jumped on the Half-Life train at a good time. I'm glad I haven't been sitting here for the last 17 years praying for a sequel. All in all, this journey through Half-Life has been a roller coaster. I was initially intrigued to see what the fuss was all about. I found myself appreciating what Half-Life was for its time without really liking it all that much. Dragged my feet through a few side games before I really found the magic this franchise was capable of. While it wasn't all positive, I'm glad I decided to experience these games for the first time, and I'm really excited to see if Valve can tie this story up in a satisfying way. Half-Life 3's official announcement would literally break the internet, and after all this time, I'm not sure it's even possible for it to live up to the hype. But if anyone could do it, it seems like Valve is the right dev studio for the job, and only time will tell how this story ends.